Pigs in Space!
Welcome to Uber Cube, the podcast we discuss all things spoiler season in Cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uber Bear, and today I am joined by both my lovely hosts. And we're going to start out the one that she's the prettiest. She knows it. Hi, May.
I know, it's Princess. Huh, Princess?
Hi, Princess.
Also, hi, it's me. It's May.
And we have one that's, he's a solid 4.
A solid 4?
Wow! I
Wow.
can't believe you
Compared to my
deuced me
neighborhood.
like
Wow.
that.
Well,
Did him dirty with that one.
you know, this has been, I'll give you that. I'll give you 4. And the reason why is because Anthony, before we started recording today, kind of rightfully called me out for being a little grouchy and a little negative. I actually couldn't agree more. It's been a very busy and kind of crazy summer, and the pessimism has kind of shone through with the last few recordings, and I've been maybe being a little bit more negative than I would like to be. So today and for the rest of the year is all positive, baby.
Problem solution oriented stew.
That's right.
All right. And May's always positive, so we have this going on. So listeners, buckle up because we're going to talk about some cubes that are in the microscope as I prep for multiple events that I'm going to either attend or participate in with these cubes. One of them being CubeCon 2025, where some of the cubes that we're going to talk about during today will be in the main event or featured. And of the 3 that I did get featured, it was Uber Bear's Artifact Cube, the Fem Cube, and Uber Bear's Horror Cube. We're going to focus again on the Artifact Cube because this particular set, Edge of Eternities, it just rolled out. For any of you artificers out there right now, that's a hard word to say, artificers, it is Magical Christmas Land or a Modern Horizon set for those of us that lean into the idea of the artifact and robot type ideas.
Have you considered space dragons?
Space Dragon. I might...
Look, spoiler, that's the main thing that I'm excited for with the set.
Space Dragon? Yeah, I did see Space Dragon. It's like Cosmos Dragon or something like that. I looked at it for my 5 Dragons Walk into a Bar Cube. That might actually be fun. It's on rate for that. But Space Dragon's actually pretty neat. I don't know if that's the official name that we're giving it now. The moniker is Space Dragon. How's that thing breathe? How does it breathe in space? And how does it, promote combustion in space in a vacuum? Question. Where do you get it from? Does it have to dip down in some atmosphere, take a deep breath, come up, and now make fire? Because that's not how fire works.
Okay.
I can't go to Yemen. I'm an analyst.
I'll add some expertise on fan lore in regards to space dragons. The whole point is that they're kind of more like celestial beings. They exist essentially beyond mortal needs, right? They don't require like oxygen in the same way we do because a lot of their essentially energy system is effectively a star inside them. They're generating their own energy, therefore they don't need to breathe. That's why they're a cosmic entity.
Making fire without combustion. Got it.
It's a theme that we see a lot, like especially back in my Yu-Gi-Oh days. One of the decks that I absolutely loved was a Space Dragon deck, because its whole gimmick was these type of like galaxy dragons and the way that they interact with space, and the whole concept of it is just, hey, we have a bunch of like basically cosmic entities that effectively have stars for organs, right? That's cool as hell.
If you called it Laser Space Dragon, I can get down with this. Combustion Dragon's not working for me. I can't see.
No.
I can't see how thermodynamics does not apply here.
Well, listen, as pleasant as this is with this Neil deGrasse Tyson-esque TED Talk that we're apparently on today, how about we talk about something a little bit more familiar with the podcast? So this is Edge of Eternities, and we're going to talk about some changes for a couple of cubes. I will say, just right off the bat, this is one of the first sets in a while, and I've paid maybe a bit more attention to this one. But every time, or maybe not every time, but a lot of the time, more frequently since I've been reviewing the spoilers, I find myself saying, that card's cool. That card looks interesting. That card looks neat. And I don't know if that's just because the pessimism is leaving me or there's a little bit more going on with this set, but Anthony, let's start out with, first of all, let's do our drinks of the show before we get deep into it. But I want to kick off with your cube that we're going to start talking about first. So let's start with May. May, what you drinking on this fine Saturday afternoon?
So I actually have a concoction, and this is not me being derogatory about it. It is literally on the can. It's from Big Grove. It is a kind of local brewery, and it is called the Rainbow Sour, not concoction. It's
Rainbow concoction. Same way that space dragons make
concoction.
lasers out of their...
Mate, if it makes you feel any better, from now on...
It's called the Rainbow Sour.
Okay,
and
well,
it's tasty.
I will be referring to you as our rainbow concoction.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, okay, that's it.
It was very sweet. All right. And Stu and I are both having the same Z's because I brought over some Michelob Ultra and he said, do you want to drink that? And I said, well, I thought about it. Instead, I'm going to have a Voodoo Ranger. So if the audience wouldn't mind here, we're going to enjoy Voodoo Ranger Juicy Haze IPA by New Belgium. So thank you, New Belgium, for sponsoring this episode.
Thank you
You're
very
not,
much.
but it would be really great because Guinness has totally not paid attention to us.
We didn't get anything. We didn't even get a
on.
tweet. We got nothing. Not even an inbox message. I'm very sad.
Yeah, I was just assuming that something would happen. All right, let's crack them open. Stu, pop it because I already popped mine, so we're already there. All right, we got the popping sound.
Popping.
All right, Edge of Eternities. So let's kind of break this one in. When they first talked about a space set, I rolled my eyes. I did. I just thought, okay, cool. I can take a breather. I can relax. You can do that as a designer. That's your option to do. I just happen to like to buy the new flashy new toys. But when this set started rolling out, I felt like it has melded so well with what I see Magic the Gathering as. It feels Magic adjacent. It feels fantasy. It feels like they tethered it not only to space. I was thinking kind of a Buck Rogers kind of idea, Star Trek, and I feel like they leaned a little bit more when they kind of did the Edge of Eternities, and you've got kind of this little glimpse of some Eldrazi folding back into the... I like the direction and where they're going. Like, I did not read all of the lore, but I will say that the tilt for this one has got my interest. It feels organic to me. Some people in our group have said this feels Universes Beyond, and I can get down with that too. I understand that. But it just feels like a story that makes sense because when we think about these planes and these locations that we're at, you have to think that sometimes they look up towards the heavens too, and something might be happening above them. So for me, from a lore perspective, it's not that far of a reach that there's something going on beyond the sky, right? So I guess that's where I settled on this. And then regarding, as I said before, artificers, the artifact count, it was overwhelming for me. So much that I started posting, in the KubeCon Discord and our UberCube Discord, an Excel spreadsheet. This is something that I do every time a new set comes out. When I see a card that piques my interest, I take a second and I type it up in Excel and go, just as a marker, and I'll say, 1 U for 1 blue. And I'll say it's such and such name. And I'll make a little note kind of in the side. I have a little notes tab that I'll do. And then as we start migrating towards getting the full spoilers, I will actually go on to MTG Printing Press, which is a proxying website, to print out some test cards, because that's what we do, and we roll them out. So a lot of these cards that we're going to talk about today, I'd say approximately 60% of them, I had the opportunity to do one draft, one test with our play group this past Thursday, where we kind of sat down with intent. We also are going to talk about Sandwich's Peasant Cube. We did the same thing, or with his, as I did with Uberbear's Artifact Cube. And we told the drafters, we want you to be critical, and we're going to seed these cards that we've kind of put into our little sleeves and mixed them in. We're going to seed them into packs, and we want your evaluations on whether or not this feels right, wrong, or indifferent in your draft, and what is your reasons for this card piquing your interest versus not piquing your interest?
Let's start with some numbers, right? So you mentioned artificers, so there are a pretty heavy number of artifact or artifact-centric cards in Edge of Eternities. So looking at your main board change list, you've got 15 ins from Edge of Eternities.
Which has been cropped down from about 37 or 38 on the original
How does
list.
this compare to previous sets? I don't know if those are the kind of numbers this is a question I didn't really prep for, so I don't know if this is something that you've got off the top of the head. How does this compare to some of the previous sets, either artifact-centric or otherwise, when it comes to replacements?
In this last one, I would say that I did the same thing with what was the one with the Urza and Mishra having the battle, the Brothers' War. I kind of had the same vibe with that one too, where I made the list. I knew something was coming, same as I did with Kaladesh. Any kind of like revisitation to an artifact-centric world, I have to be really careful. Here's the gist. This cube for the past 3 months has felt, we've talked about this before, felt stable. As in, deck diversity is happening. Nothing feels overly dominant. We know that counters has become dominant in our group. These type things I'm making notes on. So I have to be very choice. And I wanted to cherry pick certain cards. That's why I built a list bigger than what I was going to do, printed the proxies out, that playtest cards that I put in my cube, seeded them in so I can get a deterministic idea as to whether or not these would be, value add to the cube, whether or not they supported certain archetypes or whether or not they oppressed certain archetypes, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to be very note-centric in this playtesting, as did Sandwich with the Peasant Cube. And we're going to have results on the Peasant Cube coming soon.
You've taken a little look at this set. Give us your vibe, just an overall, not cube specific necessarily. What's your feelings on it? How has this impacted maybe the cubes that you tend to curate more than the others?
So the main thing that I will note with this set is that flavor-wise, it could not be farther from like the Fate Cube, for example.
Sure.
None of this is going to be relevant for that. However, there are a lot of really good mechanics that do not include like external permanents. And that's huge, right? For example, warp, right? Where you get to cast this card from your hand for its warp cost, and then you exile it, and then you cast it for a later turn for its cost. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a combination of like adventure and evoke in a way.
Yeah.
But what's nice about this mechanic is that even though that it kind of acts as that like evoke with extra steps, it's really good for like bar cubes and whatnot.
Yes.
Because there's not like extra tokens, there's not counters. And some of these cards I might want to consider for, say, my travel cube.
And I like that there's that kind of consideration that we can put into it, right? So it's one thing when you've got, okay, this cube has got tokens and counters and, emblems that might be representing this and that, right? So that's fine when you're sitting around a table, everything's much easier to track. But if you want to take something to a bar, or you just want to take something to someone's house and you don't have to lug, your cue box and a binder and 15 bags of playing cards or dice or whatever, then I like the fact that you can break that down for different cubes.
I do like some of the specific mechanics that they introduced in this cube.
Yes.
Warp being one of them, where you can kind of, cheat the creature out for a singular turn and then exile it, play it at a later date. It's got that adventure vibe. I think you might have been talking about that before.
Yeah,
and
I literally said that.
And then I like the station. Station in playtesting was a hit or miss because some of the hurdles you have to jump through in my particular environments. Station's pretty neat, where you tap your creatures. And it's kind of like a crew light idea where the mana value actually counts towards whether or not this thing wakes up. One of the things that Stu and I talked about as a downside, and kind of focusing on the artifact cube and other cubes with Station, it creates a little bit of a problem. I noticed this during our testing the other day, where I see one of the Station cards and it's got like 5 counters on it, 6 counters on it. And I immediately processed that as this is an active creature with 6+1/+1 counters on it, where it's actually charge counters. So I can see a little bit of hang up with that. I need to probably get some different color dice or some variation in order to point that out.
I was going to say that. Different color dice, but now you're having to track not just the numbers on the dice, now you're having to track what the red dice do and what the blue dice do and what the green dice do. And you're going to have a little, you're going to have a little sign that you put up saying, if you have charge counters, make sure you use the red dice. If you have +1/+1 counters, make sure you use the +1/+1 counter white dice. Or so, like that's something that I don't dislike the mechanic, but I will dislike the number of objects that can find themselves on a single playing piece, on a single card.
It did throw me off a little bit, and it probably did impact some of my combat decisions because I didn't stop and turn. You don't want to unsettle the dice and make them fall off, right? So you turning the card around feels less convenient at times. That would be something that I notice as a downside to that, because I don't want to knock off their numbers or whatever they got going on over there. So it doesn't encourage you to want to flip the card around and then take them off and read the card and see what it actually does and where are you at on this charge counter count versus this +1/+1 counter count. So that is going to be a complexity creep that may find itself with some errors, because I experienced some of those errors myself.
It's going to be problematic. I think in Constructed, it's going to be problematic. I think the first couple of times that the cube is played, because you're going to have players thinking, okay, what's on that? Are they stun counters? Are they +1/+1 counters or something like that? So maybe legitimately this isn't a terrible idea to just have something that you put up on the table to say, this is what each color of the dice represents as far as the counters.
Yeah, and then the other one they had was Void, if I'm not mistaken, and that's kind of a morbid light type of effect.
Nothing about like the mechanics of these cards are particularly like egregious outside of like maybe Station, but all these cards are really powerful. Like I've only seen like one card that's been like super mediocre. But
so, I agree with that. Void is one of those things where it's looking to see if a non-land permanent left the field or if you warped a card in. At first, this is where, as a designer, cube designer, sometimes you think about, do I want to have cards in my cube that make drafters believe that they may find something else? I had to really kind of wait and scale that one to figure out if it was worth, the juice was worth the squeeze. Did I have enough warp in there, which I really don't. There's only a few warp payoffs. You're mostly looking for the non-land permanent. But it would be the equivalent, Stu and I were kind of pre-gaming. I don't have Planeswalkers in, say, an Uber Bears Artifact Cube, where I don't want to necessarily have, like, or kill cards that say, destroy target creature or Planeswalker in an environment where I don't have Planeswalkers, because people will stop a draft and say, hey, judge, or it'll give misleading signs. So I'm also very cognizant when I'm making card choices as to whether or not I want to make an addition based on a keyword that may throw a drafter off to think that they can get more inroads to this idea that doesn't exist. So it's always something I think that the listeners should consider when you're making card choices, as to whether or not you're sending false signals.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the whole warped, if a spell was warped or if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn. So I feel like there's enough flexibility just purely from the non-land permanent leaving the battlefield to make that relatively straightforward. And I think warped, if you include mechanics to an extent where that is relevant, then great. I don't know if that's going to be the case for this cube or for other cubes, but I think the non-land permanent leaving the battlefield and the fact that some of these effects are quite significant. So we'll talk about one real quick just to give the listeners an idea. So Tragic Trajectory. This is 1 black for a sorcery. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And then the Void effect is that creature gets -10/-10 until end of turn. So a non-land permanent leaving the battlefield is relatively straightforward, right? A warped spell, do I really care about that the majority of the time? I don't think so. I think that's a significant enough boost to the effect of the card to make Void a playable mechanic just outside of having a lot of heavy warp.
It's somewhere in the middle of, say, Morbid and Revolt. As far as a vibe,
I mean, Morbid,
right?
Obviously, I always think about something like Fatal Push, right? It's kind of the poster child for the load of the ground removal. But I think this is fine, even if Warped is not a heavily supported mechanic in the cube.
Yeah, so, and then you got Planets, which I actually opted to ignore in general and may revisit them at some point. It's just a lot of different keywords that we're going to have to learn that I think does open up the opportunity for drafters, and we will make these internal mistakes. I saw it during playtesting where we're having to stop, read the card, figure out what's going on. Is that charge counters? Is that counters? It's all something that I think that every curator should have in the back of their mind when making card selections. In addition to token density, which we'll talk about later down the road. Are you introducing a unique token that creates a whole new line of play? So these are always thought process when I'm making these choices. All these evaluation points come into play when I'm deciding. When I first made this list, I probably hit somewhere between 25 and 35 cards, but then I started omitting them because it started either it was too slow or didn't have an effect that I want to introduce in the environment. It's already complex enough, or some keyword that kind of might mislead a drafter. These are all considerations.
I think you can have a fair amount of respect, even, if you will, for the play group. Like, if you turn around to us and say, hey, I've added a bunch of cards from a new set, there's some new mechanics, I would encourage everyone that they'll need to read the cards to understand them completely. I don't think that that's an unreasonable ask, and honestly, I think for the most part, I can say this for our play group, and I can certainly say this for myself. This is the new positive Stu talking here. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see some new additions. I'm happy to see some changes and some new things that could be happening with the cube. So yeah, it might might slow down things a little bit for the first draft or two while the players are learning the new cards, but I certainly wouldn't ever say that's something I would discourage from other curators to do. If I'm sitting down and I've never seen your cube before and you say, hey, I've added a bunch of new cards that might have some unfamiliar mechanics on it, I'm going to welcome it. I'm going to be happy.
Shake things up is actually kind of important.
Shake it, baby.
Wouldn't you agree, May? Just make it so it feels fresh.
I agree. Also, who are you and what have you done with Stu?
He's always looking on the bright side of life.
All right,
Okay,
so
never mind. You're still Stu.
yes, I am. I'm still here singing badly. Do you want to go through a couple of these specifics, Anthony? Because I feel like there's some cool ones here that we can talk about. Let's talk about. You already mentioned this as kind of, I don't want to say necessarily the problem child yet, but I feel like if it gets a significant amount of additional support, hint, it's about to get a lot of significant support, is the Hardened Scales +1/+1 counters deck. This is something that I mentioned a couple of drafts ago. I drafted, I think it was mostly green, maybe with a bit of a splash, went really, really powerful, and actually was the deck that absolutely handed it to me when I drafted the last time. So this is 3 cards that we're going to talk about.
I want to talk about a theory, though, May, that I have. If you have the best deck and it becomes the known best deck, and this happened with your party mechanic, I actually tried to replicate my experience from losing in party in CubeCon 2 and then tried to play CubeCon 3 and then multiple iterations that we had where we went through and played, I guess, the Fey Cube, that party became a known quantity. So much so that it was talked about, the buzz was there. Here's my theory. When you start building a meta around your cube and people start to recognize that a certain deck is dominant, then dispersion of the wealth begins to happen in the cube. Meaning through just the natural organic flow. In the beginning, someone might play the party mechanic and they thrashed me, and that did happen. But then I said, oh man, that's actually a pretty neat deck. I want to get some of that action. So I started drafting on the second time that I played the Fey Cube. I started drafting the party mechanic to lead into it. But other players were doing it too. I can attest that at least 2 other players in addition to me were chasing the known strong deck.
I think that's a meta discussion. And honestly, I can say firsthand, this is something that I experienced. This is positive, Stu. One of the very first times that we drafted your Horror Cube, if you remember, and Spirits to me was a very known quantity because it was a very powerful constructed deck in Modern. And I opened the first pack and I start seeing these cards that I'm familiar with because they're very powerful constructed cards. So I just took all the Spirits and they have fantastic ETB effects. There's Lord effects, and I absolutely ran the table. So I think that is, to be honest, as a player, expected that if you have an untethered, very, very powerful archetype within the cube, if you have one player that knows about it and the rest of the table that don't, and they just get to take all of the top cards for that archetype, you should expect them to draft a very, very, very strong deck. Once that becomes more of a known quantity, and maybe even when some of the other cards become more known for other archetypes, then that can be, I think there's a huge spectrum there. If it's just all the way at the negative end where players are intentionally hate drafting the powerful enablers or payoffs for that powerful archetype, and that's the only way that it becomes tethered, that's a problem. But if there's realization that some of those cards are powerful in other archetypes, I think that's extremely healthy.
But then we go into an environment where I'm kind of talking about this idea of a +1/+1 counter type of quantity here injected into the cube. And we've built a meta in our play group where the distribution now is beginning to happen. And players know that this deck can be a dominant deck. There's enough quantity, enough density in the cube that you can disperse this across multiple colors. I have seen Selesnya leans into this idea pretty hard because they do follow the Hardened Scales concept, and a lot of the white cards play into this idea. But I've also observed just this Thursday that 3 other players are now running it, right? Sunburst is now getting pushed around the table, etc. So I'm curious to see how distribution works in a known meta versus an unknown meta when you go to a large event, because this is coming to CubeCon featured.
And this is an interesting conversation to me because now you're taking one sort of super mechanic, if you will, which is the +1/+1 counters, and introducing additional benefits for playing these effects, if you will, right? So you just mentioned proliferate as well as sunburst. So now I don't want to say this is necessarily homogenizing the cube, but it's definitely homogenizing a particular archetype if you want to talk about the super archetype of the +1/+1 counters, because now you've got a lot of ways that you can support that are independent with each other, but they work well with each other. So if you're going into this thinking, I want to cast spells and put counters on them, or I know that is powerful, then you're going to go ham and say anything that has proliferate, anything that has sunburst in it, likely to be pretty powerful in this cube.
That's agreed. May, let's just cut into the cards. There are 3 editions that support this, and they do cross-pollinate. But would you mind taking on this first card, Patrolling Peacemaker, please?
Yeah, Patrolling Peacemaker is 2 and a white for a robot soldier, 0/0, but it comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters. Whenever an opponent commits a crime, proliferate. And can I also just say that I actually really love the concept of putting like crime mechanics on your own things to discourage your opponents from doing things? Because like in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, there was the whole thing of, we're all trying to be outlaws, we're all trying to be criminals, and now we're just like, hey, crime is actually like a kind of neat way to like play around the like interacting with your opponent. You can use it defensively, and I love that. And the fact that it's just another proliferate duder that comes in with counters is perfect for your environment.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes like a very choice type of selection when you're trying to remove something, right? And the ideal target, and this is for the listeners, anybody that plays this cube, kill Patrolling Peacemaker. You shouldn't target anything else. Let's just start with that as a baseline. This, burn it with fire.
But it's just a 2/2 creature, and you've paid 3 mana for it. Why would I want to kill this card? I mean, what's so great about it?
I'm interested to see the play lines whenever this enters the battlefield. How many creatures, Stu and May, would you want to have on the board before you introduce this? Would you play this on turn 3 on curve, exposing it? I would think
I'd play
not.
it
Or
on,
would you want to have
I'd play it on curve.
ASAP.
You would want to
As
have
soon
this
as possible.
You wanted to have this out to
As
draw
soon as possible. I want
versus
this out.
Because
having
the thing
an
about that's
army.
important about this card is that unlike a lot of like those dedicated proliferate cards, this one fuels itself. And that's the important distinction. Like, you could have no other cards on the board, and it'll eventually just grow.
And this also seeds like the modular decks. This seeds like the stations that we're going to talk about. This seeds a lot of things.
ASAP.
Right?
If it eats removal, it eats removal.
It needs to die.
It's not just that it eats removal as well, but you are actively discouraging players from interacting with you on the stack as well as interacting with permanents that you have on the board. So remember that commit a crime is if they target the opponent, which obviously would be you. Anything an opponent controls, that could be a creature that's on the battlefield, a permanent, could be a spell that you control. So you look at this, hey, you've got 2+1/+1 counters on it. I'm gonna lightning bolt this. Well, what if I counter your lightning bolt? Now you can't. You don't want to do anything with my lightning bolt, right? You don't want to.
This is going to be the part where everybody hates me. This is a commander card, and this came from a commander set, and I bought the large. I know, and I bought the oversized version of it without reminder text because, again, I build these cubes for my playgroup. That's going to come up like, what the hell's committing a crime? I don't know, man. Anything, but. I imagine I probably should actually pick up another copy for CubeCon, but I will do that. Let's move over to another card. And this one's going to be more egregious, but leans into the cube. And it's colorless. Colorless cards, mate. Yeah. You've brought this so many times before we even talk about this. Contested cards in color are a lot more easy to sparse as a designer, right? Like if you've got a card that's in black that does a certain mechanic, you are forcing someone to either splash or double pip. It makes it less, I guess, available to the drafter. Like sometimes people don't want to go into 2, 3, 4 colors. But when we start going into these colorless cards, everyone can play this card. And I did this with intent. I want to make this into like a gold rush, chase this card. Surge Conductor. For 3 colorless, artifact creature robot. Whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, proliferate for a 3/2. And now we're tilting away from the Selesnya, but open this up to everyone. Granted, the Selesnya deck's going to grab this. This will be contested.
Here's my hot take.
Yeah.
I don't think you're prepared for this hot take. I actually think Patrolling Peacemaker is a far more interesting card for your environment than Surge Conductor is.
Agreed.
Oh, I agree with that 100%.
Agreed.
There's a lot more dynamics.
Worst case scenario, Surge Conductor is like a vanilla 3/2. Even if another artifact doesn't enter, which we all know it's going to. But you have to have things that care about proliferating. You have to have an additional thing that comes down before you can actually get those proliferations. So you kind of already have to be in a position that you have like things that you're wanting to proliferate. You have to be in a position that you still have things to play in order to get those proliferations. And it kind of fills that engine building whatnot without being a strong independent piece. While Patrolling Peacemaker is entirely independent. It's strong because it's so independent.
I agree. And the fact that you can't have just artifact with Surge Conductor. You have to have non-token, right? Because you don't want players to go ham with like treasures and clues and whatnot. So I like that. And it's a 3/2 for 3. It's relatively straightforward to interact with, but it becomes much, much, much more difficult to interact with once Patrolling Peacemaker comes into it. If you have a way to get a counter on this thing, now you're going bananas.
Let's take a pause. Let's do, kind of as I was thinking this through and I'm going through that list and I'm looking at the spoilers from Edge of Eternities, I want to go into the kind of the decisions I made. So I've actually changed some of my tenets for this cube. Before it was artifact generic. It was maxed power, pushed. You know, I've got Force of Will in here. We'll talk about Faithless Looting soon. I've got Preordain. I have cube staples in this because I wanted this to break outside of the original shell of, say, Mirrodin or Kaladesh or the Brothers' War. Insert artifact type of idea here, or a thematic set. As I've aged with this cube, I have now refocused another tenet of this cube. I want it to feel immersive. I want to capture that vibe, say, of the Fate Cube. I want to capture that vibe of Uberbear's Horror Cube. I want to capture the vibe of Dragons of Winter's Night. I'm trying to think about how I can reapproach this. You know, Kaladesh gave me, like, we're in an Inventors Fair.
Your own custom Mirrodin.
Yes. Everything felt like I'm on a plane that's full of robots and golems and mechs and all these ideas. So I've kind of started tilting back towards, I want this to feel immersive. So as I'm reevaluating cards, and there's quite a few extra cards that would be considered very powerful, push cards that I want to peel back. So you will see a tilt now when I'm making choices as we move forward here, that I'm trying to pull it back so I'm in a world full of robots.
This is kind of a doomy kind of vibe that I'm getting right now, right?
This isn't going to match the vibe for Stu's brand new persona of being positive.
Do it.
I like it.
I tend to think that your approach for like introducing flavor and trying to build your environment comes from a lot of that kind of storytelling perspective. And what's cool about sets like this is that it gives you an additional palette. Well, it's not an additional palette. It's an additional color for your palette, right? So if we think of like building a cube and the way that you build your cube is kind of like making a painting, right? You basically just got an additional set of colors.
So before, the cube would feel like insert artifact synergies, and that was kind of the fundamentals of the cube. You're right.
Right.
Now I want the players, when they sit down, not only to feel that, but to have like this under their skin type of feeling that this isn't a safe place. The same thing you get with the Horror Cube, right? Or the same thing when you open the book up to the Fate Cube. I want to try to embrace that. The next card we're going to talk about on the proliferation idea is Solar Array. Solar Array for 3 colorless, artifact. Tap. Add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast an artifact spell this turn, that spell gains Sunburst.
You did skip the important part on that of if it's not a creature, then it comes in with that many charge counters.
Oh, yeah, that's even worse. That's going to create a whole nother dynamic that we talked about, but does seed into...
That is an important note for your environment. Like, +1/+1 counters, yeah, that's cool, that's fun, whatever. The fact that you get to have things come in with extra charge counters just right off the gate, that's going to potentially disrupt some of the...
It's going to make some of the stations pretty spicy.
I was going to say, this is...
It's spicy.
But there are these station cards that are... really going from what might seem like an overcosted initial charge or initial casting cost to, oh my gosh, I only have to put like 4 or 5 maybe of these charge counters on it, and all of a sudden I've got this really, really powerful card. So to get 2, maybe it could be 2 or even 3 charge counters off a card like this that already is great mana fixing, what's not to love? Or the Sunburst, for the creatures is almost gravy.
All right. So let's move over to another card. That's the proliferation package, kind of summing that up. The whole idea is to increase the volumetric, pressure of this idea. so that the dispersion happens. We'll see how that lands. If one player starts kind of, I guess, doing the little gerbil, shoving the stuff in their cheeks and filling it up, and I feel like one person's getting all the bounty, then maybe I'll reevaluate this. But for now, I'm hoping that my internal meta will kind of gravitate towards the idea of dispersion.
I will say this next card, I don't want to say I'm pessimistic about it because that's not the vibe I'm trying to put off today. But the one thing I will say, and the reason why I'm a little cautious about this card, is because I'm always nervous when you have very, very powerful and yet very cheap to cast interactive spells, right? So this one is, and if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and run with this one. So this is a null. This is 1 blue, instant, counter target, artifact, or enchantment spell. I can say, again, from personal experience, there is a pretty strong controlling archetype / ability to play this cube, if you will. I don't know what that was looking like as far as the grand scheme of the entire cube, but this is not just something to be glossed over as a, hey, I'm adding this because it's an artifact counterspell. It's unbelievably efficient at only 1 blue mana, and you have the gravy of it also being able to counter an enchantment spell, and it's a hard counter. It's not if opponent pays 3 or anything else. It's just hard counter, 1 mana. Tell us about where this fits in with the rest of the control archetype and the cube in general.
This is the comedy here. Whenever I actually introduced this card, Null's been out forever since Mirrodin. I have been extremely apprehensive to add this card. But through the advent of artifacts expanding into colors and being super powerful, I have noticed that, or have observed, that the opportunity cost of installing this card into the cube is less of a detriment. I playtested this Thursday. I want to know how it felt. Yes, I got them a couple times. I got them, though, on curve in my deck. I didn't get them at the devastating moment. I got them at the early steps where I took out a Signet, or I tried to kill tempo is how I played this card, because it was early steps. It felt like a mana tithe, and I know that doesn't really hit there, or a force spike is kind of how I played this on tempo, because this is kind of where I curved out on my lean. This card I've been really nervous about adding for a very long time, because as Stu has said, it's 1 mana, disrupt the cube. I mean, literally, anybody that leans into the idea of the artifacts, you're punishing them for it. I'm aware of this. The comedy is whenever I introduce this into my environment, I put it up on the MTG Facebook page, and I put it up in the Discord. People started saying, I thought this was already in your environment. Why is this not in your environment? It was an expectation that, this should exist from the beginning, not understanding that I'm looking for an accumulation of additional artifacts to promote this idea. At this point, the entry of the artifacts, everything I choose to go in this, we've just talked about 3 of them. Every one of those cards we talked about are all devastating in their own right.
No disrespect
I'm actually going to push back on you a bit.
Oh, okay.
So, the big reason that this card is expected to be included as opposed to, say, Trigon Predator is that something like a Trigon Predator punishes you for playing the cube because its mere existence is a existing threat. It's going to continue to put pressure on you. It's going to continue to threaten your resources, whatnot. Annual is an interaction point. You only get 1 Annual in the cube, potentially 1 Annual in hand. You only get 1 shot at this. And it's real good at interacting with things on the stack. For example, KCI, which you can't really just disenchant once it's on the board. Because once it's on the board, it's already too late. Versus, there are a lot of cases, especially since a lot of this cube has that kind of engine building, whatnot. Annual creates an interaction point, which is why it's kind of expected to be here, because adds an additional axis for you to interact with your opponent and your opponent's resources. It's not a continuous way. You're not looping it. You're not bringing it back. It's not like this huge package like what happened with Selesnya, for example, where it was just it was Gruul. But where it was just yes, I'm going to have a pile of cards that explicitly hate out all of your permanents, right? This is exclusively, no, I have 1 of these. I need to save it for that one particular moment that you're about to do something stupid.
And that's where I landed. Right. Or I did it on tempo, right? I did it on play, where I took out the Signet because I'm trying to slow down their play. It's a tension card for me as a designer, because sometimes, like May said, It's a one-time, non-repeatable effect. I don't have Snapcaster Mage in here or these type of effects.
What happens when you draw it and their stuff's already on the board?
Correct. It's too late. Now you just kind of, it can be dead in the hand. So there's a weird kind of dichotomy that happens with a card like this. Yes, ultra efficient.
I'm going to push back on that just a little bit myself as well and say that I think that's downplaying just how absurdly powerful, very, very cheap interaction that hits such a large portion of this cube can be. Because let me tell you, anyone who's playing this cube, if you are leaning heavily into artifacts and, not to put
very
something
true.
new.
It would be easily one of the best interactive cards in the cube.
I think it would be. And just the fact that this card exists, and if you have any knowledge that your opponent has it, let's say you've Thoughtseized them, which I don't even know if Thoughtseize is in the cube, or maybe you're on game 2. Well, there you go. Let's say that you're on game 2 and they've already blown you out just with this one mana interactive piece because you've been hoping that you can land this really, really powerful bomb, and my opponent only has 1 blue mana, and here's this 6-7 mana artifact that I know is going to be able to lead me to the game. Here's my bomb card, and they're able to interact with it for so cheap. That is not something to be underestimated.
So I agree with this 100%. This is why the card didn't get added initially. But what was interesting when I seeded the packs during this testing, and everybody kind of had an idea what was going to be seeded, but it got randomized in the seed, right? And then we did our dispersion. I think we did 4 packs of 12 is kind of how we kind of did this, because we had 6 players, and they were all taking notes. People played around and accounted for, you got 1 mana holding up, and we did a team draft actually, which made this even more interesting because there was commutative aspect of it where they talked about it, and I thought that was a better way of play testing.
Team drafting is the future.
It was a better way of testing this because now we've got people leaning over like Thomas is going, all right, they got 1 mana up, Anthony's representing 1, he might be holding it a null. And it made like this dynamic, this even though I wasn't, I just had like 4 lands. But you see where I'm going with this, right? It created. Were
you cosplaying as me this draft?
I was.
You got 4 lands. That sounds a lot like me.
I'm the annul player, by the way, in this story.
Good.
And I wanted to try this out, see how it felt. And every time I played it kind of on curve as a tempo swing. I didn't wait for the Gear Hulk to enter the battlefield before I interacted. That's where, kind of back to May's point, I've always been hard pressed to disseminate whether or not this card should actually inject itself into the environment. This is where I landed. Let's kind of move past a null. A null's a tension point. I don't know where it's going to land. We're going to do some play testing before CubeCon. We've got another event coming up soon. We're going to inject this. I want to know where this hits. I think it might actually come back out of the cube. I'm not certain. I'm not like pro a null, by the way.
We shall see.
Yeah. I'm not going to read all these cards for the aspect of time. 15 cuts has happened, as Stu mentioned.
A lot of cuts.
So I'll just kind of give the titles to be included in the show notes, and we're going to talk about a few of these because I think they're worthy of a discussion. Not all of them are. Cryogen Relic went in, Desculpting Blast, which is a bounce. Hyperblade went in, which is like a...
Hildablade.
Hildablade went in. I keep saying Hyperblast, by the way. I don't know. Hildablade, Hyperblast, But... these are all in there. And then Umbral Color Zealot, I think is almost worth a discussion, but we're going to save that for another time. That's sacrifice another creature or an artifact, surveil 1.
It's a 3/2 for 2 in black. It's pretty good.
But
put a pin in it for next episode.
I'm putting a pin in it. I want to talk about weapons manufacturing. But I'm going to kind of flip back here a little bit to Umbral Color Zealot. So I'm going to read this Umbral Color Zealot that we kind of just glanced over real quick and talk about this card. Umbral Color Zealot is for 1 colorless and 1 black creature human cleric, not an artifact. Already problematic for me. I thought about this a lot. But sacrifice another creature or artifact, surveil 1. Okay, everybody's got that. Probably the best, in my opinion, sack outlet that has existed to date.
That's a bold statement.
I said it. We're not scrying 1 here. We're not doing all that. Very efficient for a 3/2. All right. Back to weapons manufacturing. Weapons manufacturing for 1 colorless and 1 red. You get an enchantment. Again, a little bit against the tenets of the cube.
Yeah,
I get
is this an artifact cube that you're talking about?
Yeah,
This
it's a little against. Yeah. It's not as vulnerable, but it still gets disenchanted. Whatever a non-token artifact you control enters the battlefield, create a colorless artifact token named Munitions with... when this token leaves the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. That's spice. May, you and Cade mentioned this recently about how you both appreciated this card, and I just went Fortune favors the bold and just injected it in the environment. This is so good for artifact count and for the sacrifice. A real
I'm here for
payoff.
it.
Yeah.
Is it going to be too strong? Possibly.
Yeah.
But, like, that's what
Question
bomb
mark?
cards are supposed to do.
Question mark. For 2 mana bomb card? Question mark. I don't know. Like, I was super nervous about this card.
It requires additional pieces in order to actually, get there. But, like,
It does.
it's not a huge ask for this
We're not running
environment.
gut in here for the
I don't
record.
think so. And I think I do appreciate that you've put Umbral Collar Zealot and Weapons Manufacturing together, because you do have that sack ability from the creature, and then you have the effect from Weapons Manufacturing. But it does, to me, I don't know. I mean, sacking this munitions with the Umbral Collar Zealot to Surveil is like, okay, that's fine. But you've also got to just keep casting artifacts, which you're going to do anyway. So the Weapons Manufacturing is a nice little engine. The Umbral Collar Zealot is a nice little payoff, and the ability for you to be able to, do something fun. But I think they're fine. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're bad. I'm not going to say that they're overpowered. I think that, I'll be honest, I think these are the kind of things that I want to see in this cube. I want to see multiple pieces that work well together, that are going to give me ways to be able to interact with my opponent and create little engines. So I like it. I don't think there's a problem there. I think they can exist very separately in other archetypes. I think they can exist together just fine. I would be the person to say, I'm going to take these two and I'm going to draft everything around it and just see what I can do. So here's the next one. I like this one in particular. So this is Warmaker Gunship. This is 2 colorless and a red for an artifact spacecraft. When this spacecraft enters, it deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target creature and opponent control. So kind of like a Flametongue Kavu kind of effect. This has station, tap another creature you control, but you can't put charge counters equal to its power on this spacecraft. Station only as a sorcery. It's an artifact creature at 6+. And at 6+, it's a flying 4/3. The reason why I like this, it's 3 mana, deal some damage to a creature based on artifacts, so it's not a straight 4 damage like FTK is. But it has the ability to obviously do a small amount of damage if you're casting it early on, maybe a large amount of damage later. So I like the scalability of it. But I also think about these things with the proliferate. Again, you can start looking at increasing those charge counters pretty easily. I'm looking at Sunburst. We actually just talked about the card previously, which is Solar Array, right? So if you tap a mana from Solar Array, and then, maybe you're a 2-color deck and you get 2 charge counters right off the bat just from casting this. Maybe you're a 3-color deck and you get to put... or you don't even have to. You can actually just be a 2-colored deck. Maybe you're a red-black deck. You just add a green with your Solar Array. Now you've got those 3 colors, and now your Warmaker Gunship only needs 3 more of these charge counters in order to become a 4/3, as well as the removal spell as it enters. So this is another kind of card that I just really, really like for this environment. It just fits in nicely with the artifact theme. It's really clean from a damage. It does create a bit of tension and some decision making on the, on the part of the player, because you're thinking, do I want to hold a card like this? Do I want to develop my board? Do I want to add more artifacts so I can get more value from it? But it also has the potential to be a pretty quick threat at only 6 counters as a 4/3 flyer. So I love it. I think it's great.
So the thing that I want to note is that this is a really good companion card to a card that we've already had for a bit, a Magmatic Galleon, which is the 3 red 5/5 vehicle. When it enters, deals 5. But the important part of Magmatic Galleon, outside of the fact that it's 5 mana, deal 5 to something, is whenever one or more creatures your opponent controls are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token, which I'm pretty sure is already in your environment. So Warmaker Gunship is like the perfect companion card for your Magmatic Galleon.
It might not be in this
It's
cube,
definitely 100%
but now
not
Anthony's
in
like, why do I not have this card?
I didn't know this card.
In my cube.
All right, I'm stubbing somebody's toe.
Learning these things as we go. This is one that accumulated the charge counters that was actually in question, where I couldn't actually judge or gauge the power of the ship and whether or not it was active. So back to what I talked about at the top of the episode, this is problematic from a design, I guess, goal to determine whether or not your players are, how big is this creature, right?
Right.
It comes into question. But loved it, loved the lines of play on it. It was really fun. Enjoyed this card very much. Also, as you see, we moving through this, red got the biggest, I guess, boon from this set. And I had to make a lot of decisions because I didn't want red to tilt so much into the idea of I'm just artifacts that I don't have my abrades and whatnot, right?
Well, we talked a little bit about some of the cuts that you've made, and some of them I really like because it's less of this is and I hate to use this word with cards in your cube or anyone else's cube, because I feel it's a little derogatory, but it felt unexciting. So one in particular was Rabbit Battery. This is a 1 mana 2/2 that has haste, and when at the end of turn, to me that's not an exciting card. It's a decent aggressive card, but it's not an exciting card. Warmaker Gunship to me is a much more exciting card. They're different cards. You're talking 1 mana versus 3 mana, but I'm just talking about the philosophy.
I cut the Samurai with the repeatable effect of entering at 2/2.
The Samurai, maybe it's the Samurai.
I think that's a fine lean in, though, because when we're talking about Rabbit Battery, Rabbit Battery has a unique effect of give something haste, which isn't really prevalent in this environment. Not oftentimes you play a card, it sticks, and then you probably get blown up by a disenchant or whatnot, right? Something like a Rabbit Battery does give you that ability to kind of push forward and get that attack in. So I wanted to leave haste enablers in this cube. I think it's important so you can kind of get the gotchas. But let's kind of move on to the next card.
Yeah, and sorry, it was Reinforced Ronin. That was the one I was talking about, which is fine. It attacks.
It felt pretty boring.
But whatever.
But Reinforced Ronin got replaced by Carveron Harrier for 1 red. You get an artifact creature, robot, soldier, 2/1. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token that is tapped and attacking. Sacrifice that token at the end of combat. Stu and I are having a nice little deliberation about whether or not this is going to go in my vintage cube. We're uncertain. 1-drops can be super not exciting in a vintage cube. Oftentimes, let's bring old Stu back. Let's bring old Stu back. They can be unexciting, but the pressure
It reminds me a lot of that Spirit that's also 2/1 in white, that you could pay 1 in a white in order to make another token.
Is that
but
Clarion Spirit?
Makes a 2/2.
I mean, it's got the same vibe, but it is a robot soldier. I mean, I wanted this for, and not to go too much on vintage, but we are going to talk about that shortly here. That is an early Tinkerer target, et cetera, right? Like, I do support an Artifacts Matters type of avenue in my powered vintage cube.
1 red for your Tinker target is okay. There's a density,
a billion better.
There's a density of low cost artifacts, even 0.
I agree.
So I wouldn't put that in there for that.
Okay,
myself.
Let's switch gears entirely here. Let's talk about back to that thematic twist that we're talking about, like that peel back that I'm trying to do for the immersion of people playing this cube. So over time here in the next few months, I'm going to change this cube so you feel like more like, again, you're in the robot world. You're in a bad place, full of metal. You need to get out of here. Like, I want it to feel unsafe for you. The same vibe that you get from a hard cube.
So you're trying to...
The Terminator.
It's my wife when she's in the car with me and I'm playing the music that she doesn't like. Like, she's trying to escape the metal.
Tame Impala.
Yeah. No, well... That's on one. That's when it's sunny outside.
So we're gonna have an open discussion, May, about this, and I think you'll appreciate this. Or we'll see where you land with this. So the verses we're gonna do here is Faithless Looting versus Melded Moxite. So we're gonna start out. What the hell is Melded Moxite? Melded Moxite, 1 colorless and 1 red. You get an artifact. When this artifact enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. For 3 colorless, sacrifice this artifact. Create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token.
Let's first start out with the biggest and most significant difference between these two, which is, first of all,
efficiency.
Yes, okay. Well, we'll talk about the efficiency. Faithless Looting is 1, you draw 2, then discard 2. So it is card disadvantage, but it's sculpting. Melded Moxite is a may. So you may discard a card if you do draw 2 cards, right? So you're automatically at parity with cards. So the Melded Moxite plus the discard, you get 2 cards. You don't have the flashback ability like you do with Faithless Looting, and it's a little bit more expensive. So this is definitely a lot lower, in my opinion, on the power level, because Faithless Looting is obviously a known quantity as a very strong card.
I said I agree with you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Everyone's going to agree with you.
I would say that's
There's no argument here. So the tilt is Staples versus.
But is the 3, sacrifice this artifact, create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. If that was 3 mana and it came in untapped, I do understand that you've got some effects of when non-token artifacts enter or when non-token artifacts leave the battlefield. Was that the theory behind why you wanted to add this card, or was it just very purely, I desperately want the Faithless Looting effect, and the Melded Moxite as an artifact fills that role?
The latter. I literally want to do the immersion experience. I know that Faithless Looting is
I feel like it's an unfair comparison. Like, when I'm looking at a Melded Moxite, I'm looking more at, like, a Thrill of Possibility type card. Where it is, you're paying 2 mana, you're not getting a lot of that recursive value. And, like, you can, just because it's an artifact, but that requires, like, additional things. But the important part with Faithless Looting is just the fact that you're digging through a lot of cards at an efficient rate, and you can flash back, so that way you can do it again. And that's the whole thing that makes Faithless Looting so strong. They do not form... They have a similar mechanic, but not a similar niche. And that's an important distinction here. However, I do agree with your vision here. I think that if you're wanting to go more for the flavor of trying to go into like this artifact world vibe, that getting rid of a Faithless Looting in exchange for a Melded Moxite will improve the flavor and the like profile of the cube.
Yeah, I would agree. And like I said, I didn't expect this to be a 1-for-1 straight up. And I do believe that this is sort of a Faithless Looting from Teemo as an example, right? It's not great. And it has the May. So maybe you are just putting this in because you want a cheap way to be able to have a non-token artifact come in, a non-token artifact leave, and you do have, you can get triple effect from this, from the enter, from the leave, and also if you sacrifice it, you do get this robot artifact creature token. So it's good. It can offer multiple possibilities. I just feel like this is it requires a lot of setup to get the max kind of value out of it. So
I'm not chasing the max. So here, let's take this back to the roots. So presenting a pack one, pick one of a cube that's based on any kind of thematic vision. I know for a fact that players will gravitate towards certain cards. So if I do like Arcbound Ravager is in a pack, I scroll it out because it's always going to be pack one, pick one versus every other card. Or if I put Faithless Looting in there and I land a bunch of 2, 3, 4 drops, Faithless Looting is the land on the choice. It always comes up. It's almost like, I remember, and I brought this up before, it was forever ago, I posted my Powered Vintage Cube, and I tried to get through all the Moxen and all the things, and eventually, when I posted the pack, I didn't realize there was a Library of Alexandria in the pack. And I remember someone posting, yeah, this is a Library of the Wind, pack one, pick one all day. And then I watched almost 17 people post at the time, pack one, pick one, Library of Alexandria, Leyline of the Wind, over and over and over again. It burned into my psyche that when you present a choice to drafters, they're always going to tilt towards the staples. They're always going to go towards the lean in of the best
There's
card.
a reason for that.
Well, there is a reason for that. But presenting them a Faithless Looting versus, if I left both of these in and I said, all right, Stu, pick Faithless Looting versus Melded Moxite, the choice is quite clear and quite simple. You're going to go for efficiency. That's it. You're not going to think about all these secondary and tertiary type of ideas.
I don't disagree. I will say this.
So I'm forcing it.
Faithless Looting is a good card. I think its heyday from a few years ago when it was banned in Modern and it was just absolutely going ham sandwiches, very, very broken with a lot of artifacts. That's kind of a time before us, or a time that's past us now. And it's a good card, but it's not what it used to be. I look at a card like Melded Moxite and I can think, okay, I can see if you're trying to replace Faithless Looting because for whatever reason it's in your cube, and I don't have the grand vision that you do. This is your cube. I don't know why Faithless Looting is in there. But I look at Melded Moxite, and I as a player look at this and think, this is something that I look at as being a 14th and 15th pick most of the time.
But it presents It presents avenues. It presents a lot of choices, a lot of points of intersection. It's not ideal. Again, for putting these in a vacuum, 100% agree.
I think this is next to go. I think this will be a very, very quick turnaround.
Yeah, in the cube I think so too. It's again, it's not a staple. That's my whole point. It's not a staple.
And the fact that you get the parity out of it isn't bad. The fact, if you supported Madness as an example, maybe, okay, that would be something that would be cool. But I see these kind of cards where maybe if you've got a lot of support for the ETB and LTB for non-token artifacts, okay, that's cool. But it just isn't. It's another card that isn't particularly exciting. But this next one is. Can I go with this?
Do it,
because I am.
We have another versus.
I love
ding, ding, ding,
this
in
one.
the corner.
So
Pinnacle of Emissary versus Third Path Iconoclast.
Okay, and I will say that when you first showed me these, when you first presented this to me as a change that you were making, my first thoughts were, are you replacing Third Path Iconoclast because it's too powerful for the cube? So
No.
you're playing a blue and a red for a 2/1, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, right? So that's an incredibly powerful
really
card.
good.
But are there the payoffs like there are in the Vintage Cube where you can tap artifacts for mana or all that
whole
kind of
cube
stuff?
is a payoff.
Exactly. The whole cube is. So this is good. But Pinnacle Emissary, so this is 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1 red for a 3/3 artifact creature robot. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless drone artifact creature token with flying, and this token can only block creatures with flying, and it has this wonderful warp,
Which
for
is hybrid.
blue or
Yeah.
red.
For a 3/3. You're looking at two cards that kind of do the same thing-ish, except one makes a flyer, the other one... Here's the whole point. I wanted something that leaned more, again, to the thematic immersion. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do behind-the-scenes world-building post. It's happening after I built the cube. Originally, it was, well, just slam in the strongest artifacts, let's see what happens, right? I would call this a top-down design because I'm narrowing the edges, I guess, as I come down. But at the same time, I'm tilting more towards... I want you to play artifacts. I want you to be vulnerable to disenchants. I want you to lean more into this. And this is a kind of a 2-for-1. If you look at the human monk versus the robot, which is an artifact creature, that should open up all the lanes of suddenly my annuls have value. That was kind of what I was talking about. And increasing the density of it. So, May, where do you land with these two?
It is important to note that this is a difference of power. I think Third Path Iconoclast, I feel like that is a generally stronger card because of how efficient it is. And knowing that it is a downgrade, how relevant is this downgrade actually? When you're drafting and you have Pinnacle of Emissary in the pack, you're probably still going to take it if you're trying to go for this deck. Like that is not really a detriment to the quantity. You're not changing like how the entire package for it works or anything. The big downside is that Third Path also makes it so that way you can get benefits from casting
preordained
counter spells and other instances
Faithless
of
looting
sorceries
to
and
get
whatnot
cut,
that you
etc.
lose with Pinnacle. That is the key part that you should focus on. Is how important of a downside is that compared to the flavor win?
I wanted the flavor win. I wanted to step it back again, back to the mock site versus faithless looting. This is in the same vein. I wanted to reward the players for embracing the artifact synergies within the cube. The thematic idea, right? That's the tenet of the cube now as I've kind of moved forward to that. And I don't want people just to get value off of, I guess, just playing regular old Magic, right? I wanted to lean more into the world building.
I agree. And I think that first of all, the rate of the creature, a 3-mana 3/3 versus a 2-mana 2/1 is not to be scoffed at. And the fact that, again, this is an artifact cube, so you are expected to be casting artifacts, and blue and red has a lot of support for casting artifacts. So that little downside with you can only block creatures with flying with the token, to me, is not really a big deal. You still have the ability to attack with them and block flyers. So I like it. I think from a flavor perspective, it's fantastic. I think for the vibe of this cube, I think it's a really, really awesome, just a great switch. I think Third Path Iconoclast is a great card. What I also like about it as well is it creates separation from other cubes, from either Vintage Cube, where Third Path Iconoclast is obviously a staple, as well as other cubes that may, care more about that spell slinging ability. This is very specific to the artifacts. So I think for that, it's a win.
All right, so let's kind of move over to this next one. I'm asked you to read this next card because it's just a battleship of a card. Let's talk about this.
All right, this is Extinguisher Battleship. This is an 8-mana artifact spacecraft. When this spacecraft enters, destroy target non-creature permanent. Then this spacecraft deals 4 damage to each creature. And it has station, like all the spacecraft do. And if you have 5 or more, just 5. Now, I know it's 8 mana to cast, but it's only 5.
We may have built up to this.
It becomes a 10/10 flying trample.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty snazzy.
Pretty good. And I actually decided May to cut Meteor Golem, which was a hard cut for me because I try to support the idea of golems from a thematic design, but it's 7 mana, colorless. It just kind of, I don't know, it separated itself from the rest of them, didn't feel the samey, right?
How much blink ability do you have
Not
in this cube?
any, not much.
A single
so it didn't
piece.
feel as...
So now...
But it does loop with Goblin Welder quite nicely, and I did have that done to me.
Ooh,
it was gross.
Goblin Welder, that's kind of juicy.
Yeah, but this
it doesn't...
also, when the spacecraft enters, it still does the Goblin Welder thing.
It does.
It might be oppressive.
So... I mean, you're still getting the 4 damage to each creature. You're still getting to destroy. And when it says non-creature permanent, I said this before, destroy a land. But I think the fact that you are spending, it's a lot of mana. 8 mana is no joke. But this is a fantastic finisher. I think it fits beautifully within just the vibe of the cube again. I think for a 10-10 flying trample, no one's going to be sad to say that they've put some charge counters on a permanent and got a 10-10 flying trample out of it.
So this concludes Uberbear's Artifact Cube, which everybody's like, all right, let's move over to Power Vintage. We're going to make this super fast and snappy, May, I promise. Let's talk about this first card. Would you mind taking on... We're moving over to Uberbear's Power Vintage Cube, but I do know that they're speaking the MTG Salvation. That's where I reference this card from, and other cards. That's where I get kind of my... So thank you, Steve Man. Thank you, White Wolf. All these different people who have kind of contributed this idea of the Powered Vintage, but this set didn't feel super powerful to me in a vacuum. So there's not a lot of picks, but I figured I'd give a few of you, I guess, some
options.
A couple of dirty dropped on the ground 5-second rule ham sandwiches for you Power Vintage people. So let's go with this first one. Lightstall Inquisitor. For 1 white, you get a 2/1 creature, Angel Wizard. Vigilance. When this creature enters, each opponent exiles a card from their hand and may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Each spell cast this way costs 1 more to cast. Each land played this way enters tapped.
Any blink?
I do in the Fem Cube, which I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and pocket this up. This is 100% going in the Fem Cube.
It should.
But it's going into the Power Cube that has Ephemerate and whatnot. It's very light touch in the Power Cube.
Ephemerate,
it's still there.
I love this card.
Okay. I love the card, though. The card is bonkers.
My only complaint is that if only this was better flavor, then I could throw it in the fake cube.
Oh, my goodness. But it gets some as far as...
It's a wizard.
It is.
It is, in fact, a wizard.
It makes party.
Which is the part that hurts the most.
Party. And look, she likes to party. Look at her.
Every Fey cube has to have at least 1 angel in it. I mean, if you just embrace the angel, I feel like this is just...
Oh, this is a space angel that doesn't use combustion, by the way.
Listen, Neil, Mr.
Nobody's
DeGrasse
arguing
Tyson.
combustion, Anthony.
No one's arguing. Yes, this is not a science podcast. At least not yet.
It's thermodynamics.
All right,
does not apply.
I don't know. I feel like this is I love the card. I love everything about it. It's a 2/1 vigilance for 1, which is already an insane rate. The fact that you do get to tax your opponent either on a land or a spell is very strong. The blink is almost a meme. I don't know if this is necessarily something that you want to be blinking, but I just think in a vacuum, this is a very, very powerful card. It's not a super fun card because they just exile a card. You don't get information other than that 1 card, but you do get a 2/1 vigilant out of it. I think it's a very good card. I think in the Vintage Cube, I don't know. To me, probably not. But I think
it's
in a lot of cubes,
turn 1, all they're going to do is really disperse the land.
Very likely.
That's what's going to happen.
Very likely.
And then it won't matter. It won't be a relevant land either.
I disagree with that because casting your spells is important regardless, and certainly more as much in the Vintage Cube as any other. So I think taking a land isn't nothing unless you're flooded, in which case you're not in a great position anyway. So I actually think that ability is not to be underestimated. But you're not getting any information. What would I prefer? This or a Thoughtseize? Probably a Thoughtseize. It's a good card. But is it vintage? I think it's borderline, but I'm going to say no.
I'm going to try it. May. Vintage Cube? Yes, no.
Like Stu has alluded to, it's hard to be excited for a 2/1 in today's era of vintage level Magic. However, I like it. I think it's cool. I think my main complaint about it is just that the thing that it is doing is deceptive on how impactful it actually is. Because, like Stu was alluding to, unless you're immediately going for those ephemerate synergies and whatnot in order to just permanently get rid of it, then it's just kind of oh no, you took a card from my hand that I now have to pay 1 more for.
Yeah.
Then, the most important part is they get to choose which card it is.
They do get to choose,
right?
yeah. And I might be underestimating this a little bit from like an aggressive standpoint, right? So, you know, what would I think about this card if it was just a straight up 2/1 vigilance for 1? I would probably think this was a pretty good card. Does that extra ability really push the needle enough to where I think it should be played in a vintage? Like, do I want to play this over Mother of Runes or Giver of Runes or Thraben Inspector?
No, I can keep going.
I don't. You know, there's a lot of good cards in that slot.
It's a problem, but it's there. I'm gonna try it out, see how it feels. I'm gonna test this both in the Power and the Fem, as we mentioned, and we should test this in the Fake because it's an Angel Wizard. But let's move over to the next card. So Lands Matters, or the idea of that in my Powered Vintage Cube, has struggled. We know this. Like,
sure.
It's the low end of the tier. And I've got a boon for it recently, and I'm going to ask you to kind of talk about this and the comparison card, please.
So this is Baloth Prime. This is 3 colorless and a green for a creature beast. This creature enters tapped with 6 stun counters on it. It is a 10/10. It's big business.
Big boy.
So whenever you sacrifice a land, create a tapped 4/4 green beast creature token and untap this creature, and you can pay 4, sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. So it's like a Zuran Orb on a stick that costs 4 mana, and you do get a 10/10 that you get to untap by paying 4. To me, this is fine. I see the logic in the Titania kind of shell, right? Where you're trying to sack lands and you're trying to get a bunch of value from that. I would have preferred it if there was...
Has no evasion.
Yeah, it's okay. I think this is good. I think the synergy with it is undeniable.
It's redundancy.
It is... Maybe if you've got like the nuts and you've got Titania and you've got Baloth Prime and you've got Renan 6 and you've got 6 and you've got other ways to recur, you know, lands from the graveyard, Crucible of Worlds, stuff like that. I think that this card can do some amount of work in there. I just think again that and maybe this is kind of, I'm a little shadowed because I've spent a lot of time, as I generally tend to do, looking at power cubes like the Modo Power Cube or LSV's Cube or LSV's Power Vintage Cube. So I actually think in your cube, this is probably going to be a bit more impactful.
I think it's going to get tested. I'm not going to lie to you.
I think it should be. I think it should be. I think the fact that it just has such an organic home in that shell, in either a Lands Matters or in that Titania. And look, I'm a big fan of Titania. I love Titania so much. So anything that Titania gets that can be a bit of added support, that can push her a little bit further in the power, I'm always going to be supportive of. I just don't know if at 4 mana, for something that comes down and does absolutely nothing.
It's an enchantment.
You do well. It
can be.
Well, let's be honest.
By its idea.
Well, first of all, it is when you sacrifice a land. So the Zuran Orb, sack a land to get life. You're still getting those 4/4 green beast creature tokens, right? So you are getting value from that, and that is not to be underestimated.
And untapped, so the stun counters actually come off. So this is a 10/10 attacker for 4.
Okay, let me rewind it a bit so we can kind of ground ourselves, since Stu has taken on the mantle of being Mr. Positive.
All
for this episode.
things.
I'm gonna dome the mantle. One, it's a 10/10 with no evasion that comes in tapped. There's a lot of squeeze that in order to even get to that 10/10 part, and even when you do get there, it could still be blocked by literally anything. The important part of it is whenever you sacrifice a land, you get a 4/4 tap Baloth creature. The important part here is that they are tapped. So let's say best case scenario. You play this down, and you're able to crack a fetch, or you're able to sacrifice a land like the turn that it comes down. And you immediately get a 4/4. Great, you just spent 4 mana for a tapped 4/4. And then a tapped 10/10 that's just sitting here.
I don't disagree.
Right? What does that do?
There's 10 fetches in the cube. I don't see the problem. Or Zuran Orb.
Let's be honest.
It's not a matter of if you can, right? That's not what I'm arguing. It's easy to get there.
You want me to put a Rancor on it?
At 4 mana, you're paying in saying you get that one crack out of it to get one tapped 4/4.
I think the expectation is that you're going to have a Zuran Orb or something of the like that is going to allow you.
This pairs well with like Garuk and stuff like that. It's like a green driver.
I don't disagree. And look, you get to take a stun counter off it every time that you sacrifice a land.
Or untap it.
Well, look, okay. If a permanent with a stun counter would become untapped, remove 1 from it instead.
Yep.
Okay? So you're not untapping this creature the first time. You have to sacrifice those lands and remove those stun counters in order to untap this creature.
Yeah.
So if you play it for 4 mana and just go ahead and immediately sack all 4 of your lands,
for 16 points of damage on the board.
For 16 points of damage, and then maybe you did that with, maybe you've got a fetch land. Now that's 5. And maybe the next untap step, you take that stun counter off. So now you've got a lot of power on the board. And okay, maybe it's not untapping the next turn, but it's untapping the turn after. You still got a 10-10. Yes, you're right, it has no evasion, but a 10-10, and you've been able to gain a bunch of life from Zuran Orb, and you've been able to create all these 4/4 creature tokens. That's not nothing. To me, that there is a ton of potential there with this card. And again, I think in your cube in particular, which is obviously slower than the Power Max cube, slower than the Moto Vintage cube, I think this card can do work.
I agree.
Just to add a little bit of clarification, I actually don't hate this card. I think that it's cool for your shell. It's just important that we stave our expectations a bit and recognize that, just because a card seems really strong on paper, like actually working through the steps of how you get there is important as well.
Agreed.
And that's something that you'll find out through testing.
All right, May, you can't see inside of this right now? It's right here. It's all there. It's open book.
Let me just open your brain real quick.
No, please don't do that. All right, let's finish off. Last one, and we're going to run over this one real quick. This is one that Anthony had pegged for the Fem Cube. So this is Cosmo Grand Zenith. This is 2 and a white for a 2/4 human soldier. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, choose 1. You can either create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I actually think this is a cool card. I think it's a little trappy because it's got the second spell thing about it. I think having a 2/4 for 3 is okay on a rate. I don't dislike this card, but I don't love
Monastery
it.
Mentor at home-ish?
No, it's not even in the same universe
as
Monastery Mentor.
I'm in the Fem Cube, so they haven't printed that. That's my problem with leaning too much into the idea of the thematic design. So I can't get all these young pyromancers. I can't get the Monastery Mentor.
I'm not expecting to get a ton of value out of this. Again, we haven't really done a huge deep dive into what this is replacing, what people who are going into.
I am uncertain.
Yeah, so
to kind of bring it all back to the top of the episode, it's on my punch list. I'm looking at these cards. So when these spoilers come out, I build an Excel spreadsheet. I kind of do the ins and outs and put notes. This card's got a note on it right now. I do not know the cuts. That's where we land. Opposed to Lightstall Inquisitor, which has kind of, we're uncertain where it leans, on which side of the, I'm going to try this in the Fem, I'm going to try this in the Power.
I think that this is going to be really good. The Lightstall Inquisitor,
in the Fem.
Specifically in your Fem Cube.
Yeah, in Fem, Lightstall will be perfect.
It's questionable in the Power. I agree.
I think it's questionable, but I've been wrong more times than I've been right, and I really do think a 1 mana 2/1 Vigilance is very good. Okay, it's just fine. You cast it turn 1, you can attack with it. It stalls a Dash Dragavan. I think it's very good. I really do. I just don't know if. And maybe, again, I'm kind of looking through it from the content lens more than the lens of your Power Cube. It might be really, really, really good in your Power Cube.
I think where we can kind of end this is cuts are hard.
Cuts are hard.
Cuts are very hard.
Cuts are very hard.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, a big thanks to all of our Patreons, to Patrick, to Jeff Stumpo, Nick LaPointe, Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Christensen, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Nick LaPointe, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Huge shout out and a big thank you again to all of you for the ongoing support and helping us keep the lights on here at UberCube. If you want to get in on the conversation about Cube, at facebook.com/groups/MTGCube. Got well over 1,000 members there. A lot of cool conversation going on. If you want to support the show, you can help us out by using our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link. Get all of your playmats, dice bags, large volume and custom products available. You can find us at Bluesky at ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social, as well as Twitter at ubercubemtgpod. If you've got a longer question or comment about the podcast, reach us via email, ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. As always, come hang out with us on the Discord. You can find us at YouTube if you want to, use that to check out our contest. to check out our content, Ubercube MTG Podcast 747. And again, a big thanks to all of our patrons at patreon.com/Ubercube.
And if you're interested in becoming a Patreon, let's start out with our good friend Sarah McLaughlin. In the arms of the Patreons.
Well, again, this is something we talked about a little bit, and what my plan is to figure out a way where we can do some drafts on Draftmancer and then do some playing on Magic Online. It would probably require us to buy the cards from one of the cubes.
I'm going to do Arena
like
Cube. I'm doing the Arena Cube.
You're doing the
chromatic,
Arena?
Chromatic,
well,
yeah.
You know what? There's also rental services that are available for Magic Online if you want to just
card loaner?
Yeah, you can rent cards on Magic Online. It's not super expensive.
We should do the Fae Cube.
We should do all of the cubes. I think it would be fun. We should do the Fae, we should do the Horror, we should do the Femme, we should do as many as we can. I think it'd be a great way to be able to interact with our Patreons as well as our listeners, but also just to get some more cube, content out there on the YouTubes.
Can you make Modo not suck, dude?
Modo is an old client that unfortunately or fortunately has to support a very, very intricate and complicated game that is Magic the Gathering. And I know the interface is kind of old, and if you're someone out there that doesn't like it because you did what Anthony did and you cast a Walking Ballista for 0 mana, you know what? It's one of those that once you get used to it, you'll get good with it, Anthony. I have faith in you. And there's possibilities there for sure.
Happy
Happy
cubing.
cubing.
Walking Ballista for 0.